What if the next 20 minutes could shift your heart forever? You're not here by accident. Dive into this true story of redemption, and if it speaks to you, share it with someone who needs hope today. The Last Train. The night air hung heavy with September chill as Emma Richardson shifted her weight from one foot to the other on the platform of Grand Central Station. Her phone battery had died hours ago, and the small duffel bag slung across her shoulder contained everything she now possessed: a few changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and exactly $237 in cash. At 22, she looked both older and younger than her year-sodder in the wariness that shadowed her eyes, younger in the uncertain way she hugged herself against the cold. 3 weeks had passed since she'd walked out of her parents' suburban Connecticut home after another explosive argument. 3 weeks of couch surfing with increasingly impatient friends, of dodging her mother's calls, of telling herself that this was freedom. The fantasy had worn thin quickly. Freedom, it turned out, was terrifying when you had nowhere to go. The midnight train to Chicago glided into the station with a whisper of brakes. Emma didn't know why she'd chosen Chicago, except that it was far enough away and the ticket had been affordable. Perhaps there she could disappear completely, remake herself into someone stronger, someone who didn't collapse under the weight of expectations. She boarded the train and found a window seat in a nearly empty car. As the train pulled away from the platform, the lights of New York City blurred into streaks of gold against the night. Emma pressed her forehead against the cool glass and allowed herself, finally, to chrysalant tears that left clean tracks down her cheeks. "Tissues are better than sleeves, dear." Emma started at the voice. She hadn't noticed anyone take the seat beside her. Turning, she found herself looking into the face of an elderly woman with silver hair gathered into a loose bun. The woman extended a packet of tissues, her hand steady despite the fine web of wrinkles that mapped her skin. "Thank you," Emma mumbled, accepting the tissues and quickly wiping her face. "I'm Martha," the woman said, her voice carrying the soft lilt of a southern accent. "Martha Jenkins." "Emma." "Just Emma tonight?" Martha asked, her eyes twinkling with understanding rather than judgment. Emma nodded, grateful for the lack of questions. "Well, just Emma. I find that train journeys are perfect for stories. The rhythm of the wheels, the passing landscape even in darkness, there's something magical about it." Martha reached into her tote bag and extracted a small leather-bound book. The cover was worn smooth with age, the title faded but still legible: "Everyday Miracles, True Stories of Hope." "My late husband and I collected these stories over 50 years of marriage," Martha explained, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "Real stories from real people who found light in their darkest moments." Emma's instinct was to decline politely. The last thing she needed was some religious propaganda or self-help nonsense. But there was something in Martha's depth of lived experience, not the glazed fervor of a zealot, that stopped her. "I can't pay you for it," Emma said. Martha laughed, a warm sound that seemed to soften the harsh fluorescent lighting of the train car. "Child, it's a gift. Sometimes the universe puts the right book in the right hands at exactly the right moment. I believe you're meant to have this now." Emma accepted the book, surprised by its weight. It felt substantial in her hands, as if it contained more than its size suggested. "Thank you," she said, and this time she meant it. "Start anywhere," Martha advised. "The stories aren't in any particular order. That's how life works too, isn't it? The meaningful moments rarely arrive according to schedule." As the train rumbled westward through the night, Emma opened the book at random and began to read. The first story was about a woman who had lost everything in a fire: her home, her possessions, her sense of security, only to discover that the community she had always kept at arm's length would rally around her, rebuilding not just her house, but her faith in humanity. Emma read story after story about a homeless man who saved a child from drowning and found purpose as a swimming instructor, about a doctor who, facing burnout, found renewal in volunteering at a remote clinic, about an elderly couple separated by war who reunited 50 years later in a chance encounter at a grocery store. These weren't fairy tales with magical interventions. They were messy, complicated stories of people making difficult choices, stumbling, recovering, and ultimately finding their way towards something better. They weren't stories of perfection achieved, but of humanity embraced. Occasionally, Martha would doze beside her, head nodding gently with the movement of the train. But whenever Emma reached the end of a story, Martha would stir, as if some internal clock had alerted her to the moment. "What did you think of that one?" she would ask, and Emma would find herself discussing the story, its implications, the questions it raised about resilience and connection and purpose. As dawn broke over the Ohio countryside, painting the sky in delicate pinks and golds, Emma closed the book, having read nearly half its contents. "I think I understand why you wanted me to have this," she said quietly. Martha's smile was gentle. "Do you now?" These people, they all faced something that seemed insurmountable, but they didn't just endure it, they found a way to transform it into something meaningful. "Yes," Martha nodded. "The miracle isn't that bad things don't happen. The miracle is that we can choose what we do with those experiences." Emma looked down at her hands, at the book she held. "I didn't exactly face anything insurmountable. I just couldn't handle the pressure. My parents wanted me to follow them into medicine. When I failed organic chemistry for the second time, they were so disappointed. They didn't say it, but I could see it in their eyes, so I left." "That's not exactly a heroic story." "Heroism comes in many forms," Martha replied. "Sometimes the bravest thing is to stop running and face what we fear most, whether that's others' disappointment or our own." The train pulled into a station, and the conductor announced a 20-minute stop. Martha rose, gathering her tote bag. "This is where I get off, dear. My daughter lives nearby. She's expecting her first child any day now." Emma felt a sudden panic, as if a lifeline were being withdrawn. "But—" Martha patted her hand. "Keep the book, Emma, and remember, the stories don't end when you close the covers. They continue in how you live." Before Emma could respond, Martha was making her way down the aisle, moving with surprising agility for her age. At the door, she turned and waved, then disappeared into the morning light. Emma spent the rest of the journey to Chicago lost in thought, alternating between reading the remaining stories in Martha's book and staring out the window as America unfolded before her small towns and sprawling fields, industrial complexes, and pristine rivers, all connected by the silver thread of railway that carried her westward. By the time the Chicago skyline appeared on the horizon, glittering against the waters of Lake Michigan, Emma had made a decision. She would not be staying in Chicago after all. At the station, she used the last of her cash to purchase a ticket on the next train heading east, not all the way back to Connecticut, but to Pittsburgh, where her favorite professor from freshman year had relocated to run a nonprofit organization focused on homeless youth. Professor Adelman had always seen something in Emma that her parents had missed, not a future doctor, but someone with an innate talent for connecting with troubled kids. "You have a gift for helping people feel seen," he had told her once. At the time, she dismissed it as generic encouragement. Now, with Martha's book tucked safely in her bag, his words felt like a compass point. The Pittsburgh that greeted Emma 3 days later was a city in transformation, its industrial past still visible in steel bridges and brick warehouses, but with new energy pulsing through revitalized neighborhoods and community initiatives. Professor Adelman, now in his 60s with a salt and pepper beard, welcomed her with the same enthusiasm he'd shown in the classroom. "I always knew you'd find your way here eventually," he said, as if her arrival was both unexpected and inevitable. "The question is, what took you so long?" "I had to take a detour," Emma replied, thinking of Martha and the book that now resided permanently in her bag. The homeless youth center that Professor Adelman directed was housed in a converted school building in the heart of a struggling neighborhood. The facilities were basic but clean dormitory-style rooms for those in need of emergency housing, classrooms repurposed for GED preparation and job training, a cafeteria that served 3 meals a day. "We're always understaffed," Professor Adelman explained as he gave her a tour. "But what we lack in resources, we make up for in heart." Emma recognized the truth of this statement as she observed the dedicated staff and volunteers interacting with the young people who came through the door, some briefly for a meal or shower, others for longer-term intervention. There was genuine connection here, a recognition of humanity that transcended the transactional nature of many social services. She started as a volunteer, sleeping on Professor Adelman's couch and spending her days at the center serving meals, tutoring GED students, listening to stories that often mirrored her own feelings of displacement but were infinitely more harrowing in their details. Children who had fled abuse, teenagers ejected from foster care upon turning 18, young people whose sexual orientation or gender identity had made home a hostile environment. Within 6 months, she had been hired as a program coordinator. Within a year, she had her own small apartment and responsibilities that challenged and fulfilled her in ways she'd never imagined possible. And finally, on a crisp autumn day almost exactly 1 year after her midnight train journey, Emma called her parents. The conversation was difficult-halting and tear-filled on both sides. There were apologies and explanations, hurt feelings expressed and acknowledged. But it was a beginning, a bridge being rebuilt across the chasm that had opened between them. "We just want you to be happy," her mother said finally. "We thought we knew what that would look like for you, but we were wrong. Can you forgive us for that?" "If you can forgive me for running away instead of talking to you," Emma replied. The reconciliation was neither immediate nor complete, but it was a miracle of the everyday kind that Martha's book had taught her to recognize and nurture. 5 years passed. Emma's work at the youth center expanded into a comprehensive program that gained national recognition for its success in helping homeless youth not just survive, but thrive, completing education, securing employment, finding stable housing, and even reconnecting with families when possible and appropriate. When Professor Adelman retired, Emma was the natural choice to succeed him as executive director. At 28, she found herself leading an organization that now occupied 3 buildings and served hundreds of young people annually. Her parents attended the ceremony where she accepted the position, their pride evident in their faces and in the generous donation they made to the center's expansion fund. And then, on a stormy spring evening as Emma worked late in her office, the receptionist called up to announce an unexpected visitor. "She says her name is Martha Jenkins. She's quite elderly, and I was about to call her a taxi, but she insists on seeing you specifically." Emma's heart raced as she hurried downstairs. There, in the lobby, stood Marthalder, and frailer than Emma remembered, but with the same clear eyes and serene presence. "Martha," Emma breathed, embracing the woman carefully. "How did you find me?" Martha's smile was mysterious. "The universe has its ways of keeping track of people, dear, and I've been following your work in the national press." She gestured to a young man who stood awkwardly near the entrance settle and thin with Martha's same clear eyes. "This is my grandson, Daniel. He's been kind enough to drive his old grandmother on a rather unusual road trip." Daniel nodded politely. "I'll wait in the car, Grandma. Take your time." After he left, Martha turned back to Emma. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I wanted to see for myself what became of the young woman on the train, and I wanted to give you something." From her tote bag, a different one than before, but just as well used, Martha extracted a blank, leather-bound journal. "For your own collection," she explained. "The miraculous stories you've witnessed, the lives you've helped transform, they deserve to be recorded. Someday, you'll pass this on to someone else who needs it, just as I did." Emma accepted the journal, feeling the weight of its potential. "I've often thought about you," she admitted, "about whether meeting you was just coincidence or something more." "Does it matter?" Martha asked gently. "The result is the same either way. You found your path. You're helping others find theirs." They talked for nearly an hour, Emma sharing stories of her work, Martha listening with that same deep attention she had shown on the train. When it was time for Martha to leave, Emma walked her to the car where Daniel waited patiently. "There's one thing I've always wondered," Emma said as they paused at the curb. "That night on the train, how did you know I needed your book?" Martha's laugh was as warm as Emma remembered. "Oh, child, everyone on a midnight train needs something: company, purpose, direction. I just happened to have a book to offer. The rest was all you." As Daniel's car pulled away, Emma stood on the sidewalk watching until its taillights disappeared around a corner. The storm had passed, leaving the streets gleaming under the streetlights. In the distance, she could hear the mournful whistle of a train heading out of the city. Emma returned to her office and opened the blank journal Martha had given her. On the first page, she wrote, "The last train, how a midnight journey changed my life." Then she began to write the story of a young woman who ran away from home, a wise elder who offered guidance without judgment, and the unexpected path that led not to escape but to profound connection with herself, with her purpose, and with the countless young people whose lives she would touch in the years to come. Outside her window, another train whistle sounded not an ending but a beginning, a reminder that every journey, no matter how uncertain its start, carries the potential for transformation. Emma smiled as she continued to write, adding her story to the ongoing testament of everyday miracles that unfold when we have the courage to board that last train and see where it might take us.